100, and one should associate a figure of about 30 as the range of error to associate with that 100.
Well, I can now tell you that Ladbrokes are offering 5-1 against Labour and no offers on Conservatives, which will bring a smile, I know, to the face of the Vice-Chairman of the Conservative Party, Sir Edwin Nether, who I see sitting down there now with Christopher Jones. Christopher?
Well, Sir Edwin, has already been called sensational, these results for the Conservatives. Do you see it like that?
No, I don't. I think that Ken Harris and Bob McKenzie are quite wrong in saying it's sensational. They've been sitting in London listening to these polls and adding up sums. Like most of my colleagues, I've been traveling the country. In the marginal seats, I've spoken in 19 Labour-held marginals in the last 3 weeks, and in every single constituency, and I'm saying nothing tonight, I haven't said for 3 weeks, every sign, with the sole exception of the polls, has been exactly what these results are.
So you're saying that this has come as no surprise at all to you?
No, it hasn't. I'm naturally relieved because the polls had one worried. But right through the piece, from the very beginning, their evidence was complete contradiction to all the signs that one had learned to look for on the ground, experience of many years.
Now, the question of Mr. Powell, of course, is coming up yet again. He's vastly increased his majority.
Indeed.
Do you think that this means trouble ahead, internal trouble ahead, for the Conservative Party, perhaps for Mr. Heath himself?
No, I wouldn't have thought so. Enoch is a very controversial character. I personally don't agree with his presentation of a number of things, and certainly he's taken a very independent line, which has from time to time been embarrassing. But as Mr. Heath has said, he's a conservative. He's entitled to speak his mind. He will go on doing so, and I've no doubt we will go on having disagreements, but I don't see why this should cause any embarrassment or major difficulties in the party. The party is loyally behind Ted Heath.
Now, why do you think you have, apparently so far anyway, been so successful? Any one policy, or has it got down to leading personalities?
Well, that's difficult for me to answer. I've only stayed in politics since I left the House of Commons because of my devotion to Ted Heath. I believe that the policies are right, but I have believed right from the beginning in 1965, Mr. Heath is a man of integrity, of honesty, and of courage, and this has been the great factor missing in public life. And I think, ultimately, thank goodness, the British people have responded to an honest man. That's what all the independent papers have been saying in the last week. I believe it's true. I always have believed it's true.
It is, in fact, already being said that you've won this election in the shopping basket on rising prices.
Well, don't ask me to comment whether we've won it or not. We've certainly got off to a flying start. They may come up on that screen in the next 30 seconds with some appalling result. But certainly the results so far are very encouraging.
Sir Edwin, thank you. And from Conservative Party headquarters, back to Cliff Mitchellmore.
And one result that was not appalling for the Conservatives is that Sir Frederick Bennett is back in for Torquay. They call it Torquay, but any South Devonian knows that we've got Paynton and Brixham down there, and there is the full result.
A 4.3% swing to the Conservatives in the first result we've had from the southwest. I did miss out on the figures just to, well, see that. The Liberal did, in fact, save his deposit, 18% of the vote there, a 73% turnout, down 3% from last time in that holiday area. I did a moment ago miss out on the best result for Labour so far. There was only a 3% swing in Newcastle Central, which is the only swing we've had so far tonight that wouldn't have given the Conservatives a clear victory. But now with 9 results in, and 8 of them showing enough to give the Conservatives a clear victory, and the 9th enough to lose Labour its majority, I think there can be no doubt at all in calling the result of the election.
And Ted Leather, Bob McKenzie, telling you to get out in the country and not sit down here and read the papers too much.
Let's look at the state of the parties. This may confuse people. Labour is 5-4 ahead, but remember, Labour seats count tonight. 2/3 of the seats being counted tonight, urban seats mainly, are already Labour held. Therefore, we expect Labour to go ahead, but we also expect on these average swing figures that Labour will suffer more than the 33 net losses in the upper right-hand corner required to knock them out, and the Tories will get more than their 53 net gains required to form a government. It does look very much, virtually certainly now, as if there will be a new Conservative government, and that's at 5 minutes to 12.
And there they all are. Everything is happening now. David, what have you got in on your...
My own guess is that the final majority will in fact be a little bit less than the figure we've got. So far we've been working on the average of these 9 seats, and I suspect that those Wolverhampton swings will be above the average we shall have. When we get to the placider, slower bits of the country, we may have smaller swings, and I think that the final majority is going to be a very handsome, comfortable working majority for the Conservatives, but not quite up at the computer level. But that's just sticking my neck out for one.
Well, I don't know what these 4 are up to there. They're either cooling their ardour or something, but there they are, having a great old time in Trafalgar Square, and of course applauding themselves no end, because they're actually watching this going on. And now over to you, over to Trafalgar Square.
Well, the score, Fountaineers at least 6, Police 0, police being very gentle about it, believing them to cool off their political ardour. The fact of the matter is they're all standing up there shouting Enoch Powell. The shock results that they've been seeing on the BBC Election 70 screens have produced roars of rage, but quite surprisingly, almost unanimous roars of applause, particularly when the announcement of Enoch Powell's return and increased majority came on the screen. Now, can I have a word with you, sir? You're an immigrant.
Yeah.
How did you feel about the increased majority of Enoch Powell?
I hope it's not a national trend throughout the country, but it's just clear indicative of one fact, that the people's attitude have changed over this period, and it's a very dangerous sign. I utterly deplore this fact that people are voting on this humanish issue against something that this country has stood for in years. It's not surprising that Enoch should win, which is actually his home base. But I admire people like Wedgwood Ben, who have stood out from Labour Party and condemned this racialist tone of all this election.
What do you feel about the forecasts that have been coming out of the studio based on the results so far, that there is to be a large and very positively workable Conservative majority?
Well, I hope whatever party comes in power, whether it's Labour or Conservative, the moderation in the attitude towards race and immigration in this country would prevail.
Now, were you here, can I have a word with you, were you here when the roars and cheers were announced, greeted Enoch Powell's victory?
Yes.
Did you approve of them?
Well, yes, in a sense, in the economical sense for Britain, because I mean, there's not enough facilities for all immigrants to come here. The country's poor enough as it is.
Thank you very much. Desmond Wilcox, Trafalgar Square.
Meanwhile, one of the Cinque Ports has been held for the Conservatives. Sir Neil Cooper Key, retiring after 25 years, and a new member in there in terms of Kenneth Warren.
That's right, and a remarkable contrast there. 2 completely different kinds of men. Sir Neil Cooper Key was Lord Rothermere's son, of course, fitted into a traditional pattern inside the Conservative Party. Kenneth Warren, grammar school technologist, and has been the chairman of the Young Conservatives in London.
And Labour holding Leeds South East, to which we'll come back. But now we're also getting comment from all the way around the world here. In charge of that desk, Robert McNeil.
Well, based on reactions to the campaign so far, there are going to be a number of parts of the world quite pleased with a Tory victory, but others are going to be quite dismayed. Those parts that might be expected to be pleased, based on what they've been saying during the campaign, are, for instance, Australia and New Zealand, that thought that Edward Heath would look after their interests better in the common market negotiations, Singapore and Malaysia, because the Tories have pledged themselves to keep a British force east of Suez, and South Africa and Rhodesia, because up till now they think that the Tories would be rather friendlier to them, and the Rhodesians because they think there's a marginal chance of a reconciliation with the Tories in office. But other parts of the world, chiefly the coloured world, are going to be dismayed, and a lot of that is due to Enoch Powell, who has really put this election on the map around the world.
Do you pay tribute to Mr. Heath's leadership in this campaign?
If he has won it, which I take it you are assuming he has...
Well, Mr. Dr. Butler and Dr. Mackenzie tell us he has, but I'm not so sure yet.
Oh, jolly good. Well, then, if that is so, that is the best tribute to win.
Mr. Powell, are you going to, in the new Parliament, continue your fascinating alliance with the extreme left, particularly with people like Michael Foot, on issues like the common market, on trade unions, on Vietnam and the House of Lords and so on? One, if I may say so, one of the oddest alliances in British politics.
Well, if it were an alliance, it would be odd. But what happens is simply that on some subjects we agree, not always for the same reasons, and then we are heard agreeing. On other subjects we disagree, and then we are heard disagreeing. I don't call that an alliance. That's journalese.
Mr. Powell, the implications of some of Mr. Heath's remarks were that your speeches were a divisive force in the community. Are you going to moderate this after the election?
I would hate to bandy words, above all adjectives, with my leader.
What do you mean you would hate to? You love it.
What, bandying words with my leader? Certainly not. Certainly not. Only on one occasion, and in the mildest terms, have I uttered any personal criticism whatsoever of Mr. Heath.
But you did.
And you could... Yes?
So, I'm so sorry.
Yes?
You did the other night. You complained that he had referred to you as unchristian and so on, and inhuman.
Yes, those are his words about me, not my words about him.
Mr. Powell, what are your plans now? For the new Parliament, what tactics are you going to employ?
I see. I was going to say I was going to go to bed, but
well, yes,
that wasn't what you meant.
You're very fortunate if you can.
Well, I can.
I should stay up and watch. We've got a good programme here.
No, I shan't do that.
But in Parliament, what are your plans?
Well, I'd like to see this Parliament first, but I'm sure I shall enjoy myself.
May we assume that even if you were to be...
I shouldn't assume anything. The assumptions generally turn out to be very wide of the mark.
I will rephrase my question. Is it possible that if, in the flush of a Conservative victory, if there is one, that Mr. Heath should invite you to serve in a Conservative cabinet, you would accept?
Ah, yes. The old trap of a hypothetical question. In vain is the net spread in the sight of a bird. And you know, Robin, I'm too old a bird for that.
It wasn't meant as a trap. I was just doing my best, but I have to leave you now, Mr. Powell.
Yes, all right. Goodbye.
Thank you, and sleep well.
Thank you.
Give you the result for Nelson and Cohen.
Well, there it is. This is essentially the first Conservative gain of the night. They gained it in a by-election, but if there hadn't been a by-election, this would be a gain compared to 66. A 7.9% swing to the Conservatives, above the average we've been having tonight, but fairly close in line with the general average on a 78% poll up in north-east Lancashire.
And to Newcastle North.
Returning officer for the Newcastle upon Tyne North constituency hereby give notice that the total number of votes given for each candidate at the election was as follows. Robert George Eccles, Labour, 12,518. Robert William Elliott, Conservative, 15,978. And that Robert William Elliott has been duly elected to serve as member for the said constituency.
Again, in the solid Labour northeast of the country, only a 1.6% swing, the sort of thing that would have left Mr. Wilson in power. The lowest swing we've had yet. In Edward Short in Newcastle Central, only 3%. And there is a recount at Bilston. Now, Bilston has been a Labour seat ever since the war, and this implies that this huge swing that we had in Wolverhampton spills over into Bilston, which used to be part of Wolverhampton. And this is obviously sensational.
And now let's go to the first marginal, really, that we've got being declared, and that's down to Exeter.
Yes, this was the first Labour gain to be announced at the last election. Dr. Gwyneth Woody won it from the Conservatives, and by the sounds that have been in this hall, she has now lost it, and this is the first marginal to really change hands. There is a slightly larger electorate here this time, but there was a 3.9 swing wanted, and Mrs. Dunwoody is now going forward to the microphone. I think we'll be getting the announcement in about a minute. There's been a more effective Liberal intervention here from what one can see. Last time the Liberal candidate lost his deposit, but my feeling about this time is that we are definitely going to hear that this southwest seat has gone to the Conservatives. This is Richard Kershaw waiting for the result. This is Richard Kershaw in Exeter.
Ladies and gentlemen, the votes cast at this election are as follows. Dunwoody, 20,409. Hannam, 21,680. Morris, 6,607.